Yay Networks.
My turn, right?
Yeah, go for it.
She's so excited that I said that.
I am, actually.
Welcome back to another episode of You Crack Me Up.
That's supposed to be like a siren, you know?
Wah, 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 wah.
Yeah, there it is.
I got you. Don't worry about it.
I can add those in, by the way.
Oh,
Add
yeah.
it
I
in.
forgot. You've got all the... Hey, can we just mention, even though we were recording this in the same day, but it was on the last episode, and I'm not even going to say it so that we can keep the streak alive, but I didn't say the thing that I always say on every episode one time. I just want to mention that. If you listen, we don't have headphones on. Did you play it? He played the sound. So I didn't actually say that. That was a previously recorded sound. So I'd like to know that my streak is still clean, and we haven't talked about it yet. But maybe on today's episode we will. Alex is going to tell us what we're talking about today.
Today we are talking about how to be younger than your actual age. You're supposed to say something like, "Cool." I was waiting for you.
And I wanted to.
Keep talking, it's fine.
I wanted to leave it as a pause because I think this is. I think parts of this is like definitely very trendy right now, and we want to be able to do these things. But do you feel like I don't know. The immediate question was like, I think sometimes this topic is more important to women than it is men. I think men just sometimes try to completely unplug from that and they're like, whatever.
I can't relate because I'm not a man, except for that.
Like, I just don't think I've ever tried to worry about.
Old men got a lot of issues, so I would hope.
Not saying that we don't have issues. What I'm saying is that
I definitely want to be young.
That you don't, like, I'm starting to get way more gray hairs. Like, they're all over the place. They're running rampant. They're in my beard now. I can't even hide them. It's just like, I don't even care. Like,
well, it's not about aesthetics. So, okay, so what you're thinking of is like, you're thinking we're going to talk about aesthetics here?
But I think that's where people go. When you talk about...
and Garrett's nodding his head.
Exactly, because when you say that, people think about it's how people perceive me as younger than I look versus actually being
sagging,
younger.
Okay,
exactly.
this is important because I don't give a shit about that. So
good, but
we're not talking about that. Although
we got to establish the rules right off the bat.
Have an effect of how you look because how, your health is reflected outwards, right? Your external is just a reflection of your internal, not just how you look. But
well, your skin's an organ, so the healthier, more hydrated, all that stuff you are, it is going to look better.
Will you have a nice glow when you're hydrated and you're taking your minerals and you're getting sleep and you're doing all the unsexy things?
Her tone is so
100%. But is that what we're talking about?
Slay, queen, slay.
Will you look hotter with this? Yes. Do I give a shit? No. Let's get into it.
Let's get into it.
That is, I don't think you meant it, but that is such the tone that you
That's 100% fine because that's the take-home message and I'm A-okay with that. Obviously, I want you to feel good about how you look, but is that the point of this episode? No. The point is nobody likes to feel old. You don't want your body to hurt. You don't want to feel like you're 80 when you're 40. Like, we want to age like a fine wine, and in today's world, we can. And guess what? You don't have to like take a bunch of shit to do it. We just need
I don't have to be in the Illuminati for that?
You don't. You don't even have to sell your soul. We just need to be empowered about some basic physiological concepts in biology and know what our body's doing and why and how we can leverage that because our bodies are brilliant.
Listen, Woo Woo Science Club, it's time to put your nerd hats on.
Put them hats on.
It's time to put them on. Alex is going to drop some. You already, just in the few words that she said there, you knew you're going to get some knowledge just dumped into your brain.
Maybe even some beauty advice.
Ooh.
Just kidding.
So she does care. See?
I do care. Are you watching YouTube? Look at me.
Secretly and subtly.
Look at his puffy blue dress.
First of all, if you're not watching on YouTube, I'll just break it down for you. Alex is wearing this beautiful blue dress. It's like floofy on the shoulders.
I have ruffles on.
One of my favorite things about her right now, it's become a part of her brand, is her socks. You guys can't see them.
I thought you were going to talk about
but she's very much, you're very much into your socks. Because socks and shoes to me is like, hell yeah, that's cool.
I was going to raise my leg, but I'm wearing a dress. So
it's pandas today is what we're rocking, right? Yeah, so we got pandas. So pandas are the black and white Nike low top Dunks, basically. So it's like the trendy shoe.
With my sheer black
They're some of
polka
my
dot
favorite
socks.
shoes.
I
Yes.
thought about saying when you walked in, you remember that scene from Napoleon Dynamite? I like your sleeves. Thanks. I made them myself.
Thanks, I made it myself.
I love that. Now take your hand and put it on your chin like this. Nice bike. You take it off any sweet gems?
All I remember is
I can give you all the...
quesadillas.
Get off me, Bo Daggett. Hey, I bet you guys could throw a football over the mountains.
Anyway, okay, let's hop back in here.
Your grandma fractured her coccyx. She
Uncle,
was
was
out
that
in the
Uncle
dunes.
Rico?
She's out in the dunes.
You could drink whole milk if you want.
Oh, I love it. I was trying to see how far is it gonna go.
Okay. That's what George just says right now. Okay.
Sorry,
okay.
Now I might have to watch that tonight. Thanks, I
know,
made
it's
it
good.
myself.
Okay. The first word we're gonna throw out here is telomeres.
So the thing that's on the roof that I watch TV with?
That's a telomere?
Oh, that's something. Sorry, different. Telomeres. I'm just being a smart ass.
Oh, I was about to say, is that also called a telomere? No, okay. So telomeres are a very important
satellite.
piece.
Got it. Okay, yeah, that's different.
Antenna. Are you thinking of antenna?
Oh,
Okay, anyway. Okay, so telomeres are important to this conversation because what a telomere is on our DNA, right? Think of your DNA as like a shoestring. It's just like a really long line of coding. And a telomere is like at the end of the shoestring, like the hard piece of plastic. That's what the telomere is.
so your telomeres are in my body?
What?
You got it. Y'all got it. You heard it. It was a horrible dad joke.
Okay.
I said, so your telomere, there's in my body?
Oh, got it.
Telomeres?
Your telomere, there's a telomere in my body? Look, girl, I barely know her.
This is the greatest episode of all time. Y'all are welcome. We're on one now.
All right, telomeres.
Sorry. We're tanging hard.
We're tanging. It's fine. Okay. So a telomere is this little piece at the end of the DNA structure that is protective to the DNA. Okay. So it's a piece that it doesn't actually have like DNA genetic sequencing in it, right? And your DNA is what makes you, right? That's if you think of like a crime show and they get your DNA,
So
that's how they know it's you because it's you, it's your genetic material. You get half of it from your mom, half of it from your dad, and that's how you're created.
here's what you're going to remember is we all had to take biology class, and you're going to remember when they showed you that little circle thing, and it's like the cell looks like this, and then all these little cells line up in the middle, and then they go like this, and then they pull and separate to each side.
I
Those
don't
are your
even know what you're
telomeres.
talking about.
You don't remember that?
No.
You don't remember when they would literally draw the cell when I was talking about development, and they're talking about boom, and then they line up in the center, and they literally look like two little stick guys like this, and they all line up.
Oh, yeah,
Telomeres get stretched,
Yes.
and we had to draw that like.
They look an X.
Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like an X. X. Like in
A few of
23
you will
and Me
remember that.
or
A few of you
something.
were there with me in biology class when we did that, and I was paying attention.
Yeah.
It's like, oh yeah, this thing with that's what those are.
Yeah.
Those are your telomeres.
Those are your telomeres. DNA is like the little double helix, right? Like the little spiral structure. I just wanted to talk about like what the telomere is, a piece of your DNA. It's a piece of your genetic structure that doesn't have the coding material, but it's protective to your coding material.
Not your genes, right? Not like the things we think about.
It doesn't have like the information to like create new cells, but it's protective to your DNA structure. So what they have found is that our cells have to replicate all the time, right? In order for like we have to have apoptosis, which means a cell dies and we get rid of it. And then we have to have new cells that are created regularly and routinely in order to grow, right?
So cells basically have life cycles, like the lining of your stomach, because it's acidic, has a much faster and higher life cycle than like a brain cell does.
Mm-hmm.
which we used to be like, oh, don't fry your brain cells. You only get so many. It's like, well, that's not true. We've learned that through this process. You have the ability to then take and grow and make these through this. But what she's talking about basically is like, I don't even know if it's true anymore. It was always the thing of like, you get a new body every 7 years. Like you get a better one or a worse one. Cause it's like the longest cell cycle is 7 years. And the fastest, I think the stomach is like every couple minutes. It's replacing itself basically.
This is how, so yes. So like the telomere length is super dynamic because it's constantly a balance between like cell growth and cell loss, right? And so that's kind of like, that results in that process. And so what we have found when we do research and we're studying people who are sick is that their telomeres are shorter than people who are super healthy. Their telomeres are longer. I saw you just get excited.
No, I'm just
Brandon.
being inappropriate. It's fine.
Oh, are you making a sex joke? Here we go. You already did it. You set yourself up.
I did not say anything. Sex.
Okay. Well,
You said something about short and long. And for the people watching on YouTube, I made a face because y'all made a face too, because we're all 12 inside. And that's all I'm going to say about that.
There you go.
Tell me more about short and long telomeres. See.
Basically, what we need to take away from the telomere conversation is that whenever the telomeres are shorter, that's when we have likelihood for more disease processes because our body is not replicating in the way that it should. We're not adapting to stress and inflammation the way that we should be. And so so then the question becomes, okay, if that's the case, how do we lengthen our telomeres? Because what we have found,
Which is exactly what I was about to ask.
because what we have found is it's dynamic, right? Like that's what we just said. It's you can't compare it between people and between species because everybody's a unique individual. What we know is that it's protective to our genetic sequencing because every single living thing, including like plants, fungi, they have a cell with a nucleus, right? And so every single living thing also has telomeres.
And then guess what else you have?
ATP.
The mitochondria.
Powerhouse of the cell.
Come on, there it is. Yeah, listen, I don't know how to do my taxes, but I know the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell.
Let's go. Let's go.
My favorite meme.
Okay, anyway. So whenever we have advanced cellular aging, that's when we get shorter telomeres. So that's why, like, so if somebody's dealing with like a super intense autoimmune condition or like a 50-year-old gets diagnosed with Parkinson's or like early Alzheimer's or early dementia, and you go look at their telomeres compared to somebody who is their age but not dealing with those things, they're in a great state of health, the telomeres are very different lengths.
Which is interesting because I'm curious about how, and we might have to look into this or look it up, because if it's different from person to person and if someone naturally has shorter ones, I would be interested to see if there's a way to look at them. This is just how we always work in a pre-post manner of like, well, if we're doing certain things in order to improve the health of those, then would it actually be possible to show that, hey, when we do these things, it would actually lengthen them?
Yes, it does. This is how we get into epigenetics, which is what we're going to talk about at the end of this.
Can you look up cold exposure and length of telomeres?
Oh, yeah. Look that up. That'd be good.
I'm going to find another way to bring something back to cold exposure and be like, boom, look at that. When you get cold, you lengthen your telomeres. Your telomeres get longer.
Yeah.
After controlling for multiple confounding variables, a study in Belgium found telomere length to have been increased prenatally in fetuses gestated in colder environments. Interesting. Winter swimmers have been also found to have protective antioxidant adaptation. See, that shows me right there, winter swimmers. So people who are swimming in the winter and getting cold exposure are having better adaptation.
So I want to come back to this at the end because this is where we're going to talk about epigenetics and basically how we turn genes on and off.
Yeah, do that one.
Because
the health effects of voluntary.
Because that is what you're talking about, Brandon, is how to change how our genes are expressed. And whenever we are doing things like changing the environment of our body, internally, it will change the way genes are expressed. That's how we lengthen telomeres. But before we get to that, we're going to talk about inflammation, because inflammation is what creates a giant chaos cluster F in our body.
It's a good way to put it. Like, it basically causes problems.
It's like the root of all problems. And
it's interesting though, because I feel like there has to be a balance when you talk about inflammation, because inflammation is actually a process inside of your body that has a specific function. What I think we really need to make sure that we're leaning on here and that you understand is when we're talking about systemic inflammation, meaning all throughout the body, we're having inflammatory processes that are going on, and we're noticing that we're having irritation in our small joints in our hands or in our feet or in our knees or in our hips. And we're going, why am I having, instead of I hit my elbow on the car door when I was doing this and it got inflamed, and then my body went through this process in order to bring certain chemicals in my blood in order to bring about more healing, that then also were then flushed away, changed, heals, and goes back. Because I think a lot of times we say, oh, inflammation bad, always bad. And it's like, that's not true. Actually, when you're working out, you're creating inflammation inside of the body. And then what we're working to do is be able to have recovery from that. But when we're getting into this, I want to make sure it's just understood of like, we're talking about systemic inflammation for chronic periods of time that is starting to lead to issues.
Yes. I want to talk about different types of inflammation, and list them out to better discern for our listeners what you're talking about too.
Okay.
Discernment. I had a thought and then I forgot it.
That's
Maybe
my favorite.
It'll come back to me.
Well, since what we talked about on the last episode, I've had some moments like that where it's just like, it's okay, letting my brain come back.
I'm just gonna let it. Yeah,
We're just letting my
Maybe it'll
brain come back.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay, just go on to the next one, and then it'll come back, and you'll be like, oh yeah.
I
Happens
know.
every
I
time.
just can't remember if it was about inflammation or if I should have written it down. But yes, inflammation is good at certain times. Oh, that's what I was going to say. There's been research that has shown heavy bouts of extensive exercise, like extreme exercise, has increased oxidative stress, which we're going to talk about too, which actually shortens our telomeres.
Interesting.
So it's a balance between the cell replication, right? Because that's what changes the telomere length, is how fast, how many replications our cells are going through. And so that,
which I also want to say just really quickly, that's not the excuse to be like, I knew I shouldn't do anything, I'll just do nothing, because that can be bad for you. It's like, it's not what we're saying.
It's not what we're saying at all, because we know our body has to break down. It has to go through cabalysis.
Well, it's
like, it has to be broken down.
Yeah, it's
catabolic in order to build back up. So you were talking about systemic inflammation, chronic inflammation being the root of all evil, right? And you would be right. Our body, inflammation is just, there's different types, and it's basically something that's red hot, swollen, and causes pain. Like those are the 4 signs of inflammation. Mm-hmm. And so when we have acute inflammation, which is usually like an injury, right? Like you hurt yourself, you hurt your knee, you hurt your elbow, you got a whelp or whatever the case, right? You got a raspberry. Do you call them raspberries or strawberries? I say Georgia has permanent strawberries on her knees.
Raspberry,
right now.
I typically do is like when you're blowing a raspberry, and I say strawberries.
When you
That's a raspberry.
But I also think that's a raspberry too. I think I do raspberry for both. That's weird.
I say, well, like right now she has permanent strawberries on her knees because she
just
plays hard and
yeah.
she eats shit all the time, and so her knees are constantly just like scabbed. And
Dude,
so
that is my youngest
they've
right
got
now.
like the skin turns pink, right? There's blood, it hurts,
Mm-hmm.
it gets itchy, all all those things, right? So that's acute inflammation. And it doesn't stick around for a long time because, like Brandon said, there is a good specific purpose to that. The extra blood, or the blood, brings our white blood cells to clean it up, right?
Well, you have what's called an inflammatory cascade. So the tissues that are around the area of injury secrete certain proteins into the blood that then kicks in your inflammatory cascade to then bring certain things into the area. There's cytokines, and again, this is mostly off the top of my head because I'm trying to remember the whole process of like, I don't remember if it's C-reactive proteins or not, but I think there's like this whole cascade that happens, and that brings more cytokines and other things to the area in order to basically clean that up, which is, I don't know if you've got anything in here that talks about ice. This is where it gets fun about the conversation about ice and inflammation. Ice is not good for when you have something like this.
Yeah, you're like,
No, so ice is not good. It actually gums up the clearing out of this process and slows that down and restricts everything in that area and keeps your body from being able to actually flow and get that stopped. They've actually also shown that it makes the pain worse. I forget what it's called, but you basically have some...
It's like a rebound effect,
But you have
right?
like a rebound basically, and what happens is because you make the nerve cold, what you're doing is slowing down its function, and then whenever it comes back, it actually rebounds and rebounds stronger. So it would be like, oh, it hurts, and we put that on there and we do it, and then it tends to make it worse. Versus, I'm not saying, oh, we go heat too. It's like you can go heat and it can help with that. There just needs to be a balance of really ultimately allowing your body to do what it's supposed to do in those situations.
Trust the body? What?
Weird.
okay,
Only
so
if you want to.
the types of inflammation though too.
So then we have, so that was acute. Then we have chronic inflammation, which is what we, whenever we talk about inflammation on this podcast, that's usually what we're referring to. It's inflammation that lasts a long time, over a week, right? And it doesn't have to, it can be local, like what we're talking about, where it's like you hurt your knee and that's where the inflammation is. Or it can be systemic, like gut issues, right? Or like autoimmune issues, hormones, like that sort of stuff, or blood sugar, right? Diabetes, we have systemic chronic inflammation, meaning it's there pretty much all the time, or it's reoccurring, like it's a problem that continues to come back. It doesn't have it's not fixed, and or it is within your body. It's not contained to like you say, you get sinus infections, right? It's not contained to a cavity, which would be more local. And so lots of different types of inflammation, lots of different causes of inflammation, some very obvious, like an accident or an injury, right? And some not so obvious, like a deep viral infection, like we got mono, right, when we were younger. Now we have Epstein-Barr, and it's opportunistic, so that now we have like our immune system is a little bit compromised. So anytimes we get really stressed out, we tend to get sick, right? Or like long COVID, like people are dealing with long COVID, right? Like these sorts of things that sit and wait, right? Or a cold sores, like when a cold sore pops up when people get really stressed out, like that's a deep viral infection, right? And so whenever we have a lot of stress and our body's ability to adapt that stress is overpowered, that is when we get issues.
Or diminished. It's just non-existent. It's not as there as it needs to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's compromised or it's overwhelmed. It's like one or the other. It's like it never even had a chance to win the fight, or it's starting to now lose the battle because it's being overwhelmed with what it has access to.
Yeah. Yes. I like to think of it like, did we talk about this episode or last episode? Like, so it's your nervous system, its entire role and responsibility is to adapt stress. That's what it does, is like intakes information from your external environment and your internal environment and figures out what to do with that information. And like,
correct.
That's all
center.
it does.
Yep.
Yeah. And what I was gonna say is like this analogy of, think of it like a bucket. And if our daily stress is just like water being poured into that bucket, our body's either going to do a really good job of letting that water filter out, right? The bucket has holes in it, and our body's going to do a really good job of letting that water filter out, or our holes are going to be clogged up. The water's not going to be filtering the way that it's supposed to. So then the water level in the bucket is high, right? So now we have a bucket that's not draining. So there's stagnant water in there. So then when we continue to pour just water from the daily stresses of life, like I have to get up, I'm a parent, I have to take care of kids, I have a job, I have to go perform, I have to do these things, right? And I also have to eat, my body has to digest and all that sort of stuff. All that's stress. And whenever we pour that regular stress, because our body's not filtering the other stress we have, right? So we have this accumulation of stress, then it sends us into this chronic inflammatory systemic issue.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Does that make sense, Garrett?
I normally just describe
does.
those extra stresses as like you have the bucket, and I was like, then the things that come in on top of that are like rocks that get dropped in there. So now the capacity of even within the bucket is diminished, and then it just starts to, we're getting spillover because it can't handle typically what would be flowing through there.
Yes.
It's like traffic in Dallas when, you know, all of a sudden,
spillover.
yeah, something happens and you're like, shit, we can't handle the amount of traffic that's trying to get through an area because we block something off.
So it's actually interesting you're talking about stress and the response and inflammation. So my wife actually had an experience of this. She was so stressed out that so she got really hot, and she had these we thought she was allergic to something. She had a physical skin reaction to the amount of stress that she had. So I put her in
like hives,
oatmeal bath to try to like just kind of like soothe the areas, because she has bad skin already. So she gets like, doesn't matter what it is, like a mosquito hits her and it looks like she got hit with a paintball gun. But we went to the doctor. She had passed out. She got so hot because of all of it. There were, just little welts all over her that were causing her skin to get hot, and so it caused her body to get hot. And then she went to the bathroom while I was asleep, and I heard her boom hit the ground.
Oh my gosh.
She hit her head. She had passed out. So she got it too fast, was already hot, and all of that combination of everything had her fall over. And we went to the doctor. They told her we went to the ER because I didn't know what it was. I thought
scary.
she would like had just a complete blackout and it was something serious. Turns out it was just all related to stress. She goes, you had a stress-related reaction. And they gave her a minor anti-anxiety, like something just a little bit higher than like Dramamine.
Poor thing.
She took that and it all went away. It was the craziest thing. So when you mention, stress, it's interesting what stress does to the body and how it flares up.
I think, it could have been like super high stress was why do I always have trouble with phrases? The straw that broke the camel's back. Is that correct? Did I use that right?
How the sausage is made.
How the sausage is made.
The camel hump on the dog.
The camel hump on the straw that broke its back. It could have been stress. Whereas like if that's the state of her skin often, and it has been that way for a long time, I'd be super curious, like the state of her microbiome, like the state of digestion, hormones, like all that sort of stuff. Because usually there is, right? Things don't happen in a vacuum. Our body is a giant mechanism of feedback loops, just like constant feedback loops, talking to one another all the time. And that's how we get into this cycle of like high inflammation, oxidative stress, epigenetics, genes turned on and off, lengthening and shortening of telomeres. And
I was only laughing because that's one of her favorite phrases.
What?
That's an Alexism.
What is?
Things don't happen in a vacuum. That's
Things
a
don't happen in
youism.
a vacuum.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
I have a
You're one of the only people that I've ever heard say that. And it's like, oh, and I know exactly what you're talking about. It doesn't happen in a closed environment. That's not what's controlled. There's multiple contributing factors.
Yes. Yes.
I think
it's
I have
never
a similar
one
analogy
thing.
when it comes to migraine. I'm like,
never one thing.
Like it's always when the barometric pressure changes. And I'm like, always? And they're like, well, not every time. Well, it's every time I drink wine. Was it always when you drink wine or just and it's like, exactly.
It's impossible for it to be one thing because everything's connected to everything else.
Well, we talked about that on an episode before. Allergic reactions or issues like that or responses are consistent. They're not transient. Transient means, I can kind of change and I'm on the scale. It's like, nope, they're consistent every time. It's like A equals B every single time. They don't go, well, A equaled E this time. And it's like, no, that's not how this works. It's not transient like that. If it's an actual response like that, it's always this.
Yes. And I always go back to the stress timeline, right? Because at the foundation of all this is how well is our nervous system adapting to stress. And at some point we can talk about or figure out, pinpoint what happened, what events happened, either cumulative or singular, that was such an overwhelming traumatic event for the nervous system that it's now in a chronic state of fight or flight, right? Where it's in a chronic protective mode. And that is also going to drive inflammation, because the body sees if everything is if you only have a hammer, then everything is a nail, right? And that's what that state is. That's what that mode is. It's protective.
Everything's
So
a
there's
fire, and we have water
nothing-
for that, and that's just the response. Oh, this is what we need for that.
Yes. And so let's get into oxidative stress. Probably, I think oxidative stress, I don't know if a lot of people have heard of that. I know pretty much everybody's heard of things like antioxidants, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Would you agree?
Yes.
Brandon?
Yeah, I would.
Antioxidants.
I think it's a very, I mean, I don't know how deep you want to get into it. I think it's a very commonly used buzzword.
Yeah, because
within
everybody just
certain
goes,
things.
"Oh yeah, I take this because it's a high antioxidant." You know
Yeah.
that you have to take
It's
it.
an
Like, what is
antioxidant.
it? What is an antioxidant?
Right.
Didn't
What
you
is
know
an
that wine has
antioxidant?
antioxidants in it? Like that's
Only
why
red
I drink it.
and only one
This
glass.
This is
Yeah.
but that's what I'm saying is this is where it comes from. Is it's a word that I can use in this
Yes.
to be like, yeah, and it has antioxidants in it. So
Oh, it's so fun. Okay. And like to your point about breath work, so oxidative stress basically comes in the form of free radicals. Ever heard of this? I think that's a band. No, that's new radicals. That's
I'm
new
sure
radicals.
there probably
Yeah.
is one.
It's new radicals. Free radicals. And what that is basically molecules hopping around with only one electron in the outer shell. So,
nice.
right?
Nice.
This is going to be fun.
A couple episodes ago, I was the nerd. Now you're the nerd, and I like
I'm
it.
the nerd now.
You know what's funny is I'm such a visual learner. As soon as you did that, I literally was like, boom, and I had the
The
circles,
nucleus,
and I had
protons, the outer ring.
Yep, and I had the
Mhm.
positive, negative,
Yep.
negative, positive, and I had like all
Yes.
these, and it's like immediately my brain was like, oh yeah, and that looks like this, and I could see it
Yes.
flowing through your body. Like,
So we've got
I'm
neutrons,
such a visual nerd.
protons, and electrons, right? Yes.
Jimmy Neutrons, yep.
Jimmy Neutron. And the electrons they have a negative charge and they hang out in the outer shell, right? Whereas like the protons hang out in the nucleus. And so generally electrons like to be paired. They like to have a buddy. But free radicals have an unbound electron, which make it a highly unstable molecule. And so what happens is they like to go steal electrons from
They
the
cause
other
problems. They're
molecules so
bullies.
that they have a pair.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
they're
they-
bullies.
they
They
s-
go around and take
Mhm.
stuff.
From other tissues,
Yep.
right? And so then they make other tissues unstable because they leave them with one electron, right? So they break those molecules down. So that's why when we have oxidative stress, essentially what that means is, and oxidative stress is driven by chronic inflammation. So we have these molecules that are running around stealing other electrons from tissues, creating a breakdown of those tissues.
And you can probably in tons of disease processes read and see this same stuff described within there in some portion. It's just the fact that it's in this part, it affects these cells, or it affects this part of the body, or it affects this based on, like we talked about, our types of stresses, or where that stress is, or lifestyle factors, or certain contributing things. But this is also why you could probably type in free radical on Amazon, and I guarantee you there's a bunch of products that come up, because this is a very popular thing to mention within certain products of like reduces free radicals.
Yeah.
Which, as you
I've
know,
always,
are bad.
I've always heard of free radicals. Never knew exactly what that meant.
It doesn't sound bad.
You know,
I
I
don't
just
think
know
that-
that they're like they
Well,
can,
I don't
they
think
can
the,
be cancer
the name
causing
inherently
if they,
sounds bad.
if they
Oh,
wreak
right.
because they wreak havoc throughout the system, and they can
Mm-hmm.
kind of lower. Don't they lower your immune system in ways too? Like,
So chronic inflammation is going to lower your immune system,
Gotcha, okay.
right?
Well, it's going to overactivate it and then diminish it. What happens is the first response is like, we've got to get everyone on the fight. And then as it gets spread thin and overworked.
Yeah. So whenever we have an abundance of chronic inflammation, which drives this inflammatory process like you talked about, right? We
Mhm.
get a cascade of things. And so oxidative stress occurs. We will create, whenever we're using oxygen and nitrogen, the breakdown of those things creates free radicals. This is why we need glutathione. That neutralizes it. So you can go get IVs of glutathione.
That's why glutathione's hella pop. And that actually
are
is
there
legit.
are there natural sources of glutathione? Like, I mean, like how does one
Glutathione's made in your body.
made in the body? Okay, so that's
Mhm.
like, is it like it's an artificial or is it extracted from like donors?
It's definitely not
a
extracted
good
from
question.
donors. That is a good question. I don't know how it's made.
I don't know.
I have to look into it.
Okay,
I just know I've gotten it. I pretty much do it anytime I get an IV.
and where does that take place in the body? Like, how is that made? Do you know?
Glutathione?
Yeah.
Oh, I'd have to look it up. Like the actual cellular process of
Well, I guess what, you know how the pancreas, you know,
it's
does
an
insulin and-
enzyme. Yeah,
It's an
so
enzyme,
it's an
okay.
enzyme. So kind of like magnesium has different responsibilities, I guess, for lack of a better word. Like it does many different things.
Gotcha.
Like glutathione's an enzyme. So when things are being broken down and it attaches, glutathione's something that attaches to neutralize.
Okay, got you.
So glutathione is produced exclusively in the cytosol and actively pumped into the mitochondria. GSH is made available in
Mitochondria.
the cells in 3 ways. De novo synthesis via 2-step process catalyzed by the enzymes glutamate and cytosine ligase. I knew it had to be glutamate. I'm
Oh
like,
wait,
it's
so maybe you don't take
glutathione.
glutathione. You do glutamate.
No, you take glutathione. They're giving
I
you.
wonder how that's made.
Yeah.
Then. I'm curious. I don't know that, Garrett.
Sorry, yeah,
that's
I
an
was
interesting
curious.
question that we should
That's
know
another
what
one that
you're
you
putting
need
in
a
an
KP
IV
for.
in your body.
Exactly. That's where my brain went.
Okay, so I'm going to keep going with this. So we get free radicals just by our body's natural process, but we can also get them from outside sources. Things like cigarette smoke create a lot of free radicals. Things like environmental pollutants, pesticides, industrial solvents. So like your tap water usually has a high number of pesticides, a high number of pollutants. Right? Shocker. Maybe for some people. I know for this
Right.
podcast group here, not a shocker. But so when we're taking these things in, or like oats, corn, like it's heavily sprayed with pesticide. And so we intake these things without even realizing it, and it can be contributing to this process again without us even realizing it, adding to all these sources of inflammation. Things like UV radiation. So when we're in the sun too long, right? Sun exposure is not bad. We talked about did we talk about tanning?
I don't think we
Tanning
talked
your
about.
balls,
Tanning your-
sunning-
Did
sunning
we
your-
talk about that on
We
the air?
talked about
I
that a
mentioned
little bit. We were just like
Okay.
a balance of like getting sun exposure is good, but then what you're talking about of like
the dangerous
for too long,
elements.
or you do
Tanning
it all the
beds.
time. Tanning
Well, I
beds,
think about
yeah.
tanning beds.
Oh,
Tanning beds
bad.
were like, I lived in a tanning bed in high school. Everybody did.
Yep.
Mhm.
And so talking about aesthetics, we were talking about that. High free radicals, high oxidative stress will increase things like sunspots, skin tags, wrinkles, right? Because our body's not doing a great job of neutralizing those
I
or
have
getting rid of them.
Plenty of skin tags.
I get like the our cherry angiomas. They're little, like the little red freckles
Mhm.
looking things, that sort of stuff. So if we've heard of antioxidants, that helps neutralize these free radicals, right? And that stuff you can take
Well,
in
you
foods.
you listed ozone here, which is very fascinating
I
to
skipped
me.
over ozone. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
because you know
It's it's another form of radiation,
you get those
right?
you get those reports
Mhm.
here in Texas all the time of there's
Air
an ozone
quality
warning
or
that-
air quality
yeah.
is bad. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So like they'll often say if you deal with like respiratory issues, if you deal with pulmonary stuff,
Right.
like you don't, it's maybe a good idea for you to actually stay inside. Don't go do like a heavy
Right.
workout outside where you're going to be huffing and puffing potentially things that would be harmful to you if your body is in a state that is not super fit and healthy.
Which, if
Right.
you're curious about ozone, it's just 3 oxygen molecules.
Yep, nailed it. Listen, you're going on the nerd level. Trust me, I just looked up how we basically make glutathione, and I was like, oh, biochemistry. I was like, oh yeah, you know exactly.
Yeah.
So you see those, and it's like, yep, you have to have this. It's basically just taking 2 different molecules inside of the body using certain lipases or synthases or whatever it is, which basically break things down or cut things off of stuff, and then it takes some energy to break that down, and so your body has the ability to produce it. What she's talking about is basically without having to produce it or give it any of that, we can give it that specifically so then it can be used for its function. So when you're talking about
Yeah.
just putting in glutathione, that's wise. It's going to help decrease the oxidative stress that is going on inside
Right.
the body, and it would help fight against that.
We need to figure out how we get the glutathione, though,
What do you mean?
because we know it's made in the cell. So how do you put it in an IV? Where does it come from?
Right.
Can you synthetically make it? Like that was his question, and I don't know the answer to that. I'm curious as well. Other things that increase oxidative stress because they increase chronic inflammation and have been shown to correlate with like shorter telomeres are major depression and major psychosocial mental health stuff. And we know that the root of that is, we talked about this on a previous episode, ACEs, or adverse childhood experiences. So having things happen to you when you were a little kid can actually increase your inflammation, your stress, or it just help. Your body won't be able to deal with stress at the same capacity it could, which is what drives chronic inflammation and oxidative stress. So just something to note, if we have things that have happened to us, whether we were sick when we were younger or, grew up in a really chaotic, unpredictable, abusive home, or we just didn't have a lot of predictability, a lot of routine, a lot of structure, that can be working against us. It's our responsibility to take ownership of what happened to us so that we can heal and move forward. And then antioxidants, want to touch on that too. Antioxidants it's like vitamin C, vitamin E. We mentioned red wine, cacao, like dark chocolate, zinc. The red wine and the cacao is like phenols, like phenolic compounds. Polyphenols. Yeah, exactly. And so those are going to have forms of antioxidants. And reasons why they're good is because antioxidants also have only one electron in the outer shell, except they don't feed off of other tissues. They go and bind the free radicals. So the free radicals, all they want is a buddy, and they'll steal somebody else's buddy in order to have a buddy. But if we have antioxidants, they help bind those free radicals before they can steal them from the other tissues. So they keep them neutralized.
Gotcha.
That's why they're helpful. And generally, if we've got a good diet, we're getting them anyway. So like needing to go like megadose antioxidants, or we talk about like, pendulum swinging, right? Like this is not just go, in order to help your stress, go buy some supplements and just take a shit ton of them. Like not what I'm saying at all, right? It's making sure the best form of this is going to come in whole foods, not supplements. And so if we can get things like green leafy vegetables, right?
I was gonna say, like,
zinc is like shellfish, like
we've
fish.
heard all the time about like wheatgrass, and I've never actually looked into. They always say, you take a shot of wheatgrass, but like, what in wheatgrass is the thing that's helping you? Because they're like, it can help you. It's cancer fighting.
I couldn't even tell. I mean, maybe because it has like a high level of like vitamin C or something like that. Like I think spinach has more vitamin C than an orange, but
we hear about
orange is marketed
all the
to us, right? As like high vitamin C, drink orange juice or whatever. Which is, if we just ate a diet with whole foods that was colorful, you're getting all of these compounds.
I mean, WebMD just says that wheatgrass is high in. Oh, it's got glutathione in it, vitamin C and vitamin E. So it just includes a bunch of antioxidants in it, essentially. And it talks about antioxidants fight free radicals in the body, reducing oxidative stress and protecting against health conditions like arthritis, cancer, and neurodegenerative diseases. That's from WebMD. So they weren't, lying to you when it comes to that. I think they also like the fact that it's low calorie. So there's not a lot of calories that you're getting in that. And again, that's anything with juicing. Man, we could do like a whole. One of the things I'll put people on.
Sorry to bring this. I mean, it's a tang. It's a tang that's part of it. But I noticed. So the reason why I said that is because the image of going to Jamba Juice. You know how they used to like juice.
Yep.
Yeah,
they used to juice it, but now they put it in a bottle. And now I'm curious how good that little bottled pre-processed stuff is. So you can't go in and get a fresh juiced wheatgrass anymore. It's all prepackaged
And
by
the answer
Jamba
is
Juice.
not as good because the longer it's sat on the shelf and the more it's had exposure,
And I haven't- yeah.
the less effective it's going to be. So that's, I mean, if you're like, well, I get like we every once in a while will get the juices that are pre-made from Whole Foods and you can look at the expiration date and do all that. It's like, if you wanted a good one, go to a place where they make it right there and right then and be like, hey, I want to order this. And when they make it right then, that's going to be the best time because you've had less time for the vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, everything in it to be broken down more. The more they're exposed to things, the more they're going to be broken down. So they did that for probably ease and speed and all these things. And then we don't have to keep up, like trying to keep up with that was probably a nightmare for them, but it probably lost a vast majority of the benefit
Right.
and was mostly just, we're known for the friggin' wheatgrass thing.
Got it.
Is Jamba Juice even still a thing
Mhm.
anymore?
Yeah, I got one by my house.
I only ever see the one that's at
I go to Juice Land.
in
That's
the
Austin.
All
mall.
the Jamba Juices are terrible for you because they just put
Yeah.
sugary, like soaked vegetable or fruits and veggies in there.
Which, by the
Yeah.
way, the glutathione production.
I was about to say it comes from plants. That's probably, is that how they do it?
No, so they ferment it basically.
They
So there's a
ferment it.
fermentation process that they use in order to produce it.
Brown
But
plants great.
I wanna
good
look up,
electrolytes.
like, obviously we've learned that wheatgrass is one.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense because we're talking about oxidative stress, telomeres, all of that is eukaryotes, which is the type of cell that is all living things. So it makes sense that they would have the same process of this.
Sulfur-rich foods.
Duh.
Okay, sorry.
Okay, we're going to go to observed results of inflammation and oxidative stress, right? So we mentioned this, but things like autoimmune issues, cancer, right? Because we have cell replicating that's not turned off. That's the same with like autoimmune, where our body's not recognizing itself. So it's attacking itself, so to speak. Things like rheumatoid arthritis, kind of similar to something autoimmune, heart and cardiovascular disease, neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and aging skin, which I already talked about.
See,
Wrinkles,
I told y'all.
loss of
I told y'all.
elasticity,
She could not do it.
sunspots, etc., right?
ETC, ETC.
So now so those are the observed results. And so what I am suggesting is you do have, I don't like the word control, but you do have massive influence over the state of your own health. And that's not super popular to say.
You can influence
when people, a massive influence with when you are going through something, when you are sick, when you are dealing with an autoimmune issue, when you are a spoonie, when you have had cancer, or you're battling cancer, or somebody you love is battling cancer. It's not a popular thing to say, and it's a bold thing to say that you have influence over it.
So just to mention super quickly, because you said spoonie, and some people may know what that is, and I assume a lot of our listeners probably do. A spoonie is somebody that is living with an invisible illness that isn't typically something that you can see. Like, it's not something where you're like, oh, you clearly have an issue that's going on here. You can't see it with the naked eye. It's something that's going on internally inside of their body that they're dealing with and struggling with. And so there's this whole thing about, I only have so many spoons to be able to give out today. And when you're living with an invisible illness and you're tired and sick and not feeling well, you call yourself a spoonie because it's like you only have so many spoons that you can give out to certain things. And some days you may have more and some days you may have less. But it's like a whole community and group of people who struggle with invisible illness is what a spoonie is.
Thank you. Nailed it. And I've worked with this community for a long time, and I'm comfortable with the hate,
Oh, it's bound to come.
because it's either you've got to be in a sweet spot to say, okay, I'm ready to do this, or we're still trying to find answers in a system that isn't designed to give us those answers.
Well, the thing that you have to ask
it.
yourself is, why is this your identity?
Yeah.
Like, why do you like to hold on to this as your identity? Because
and that's with not just like spoonies, that's with really any sort of people. I'm a cancer survivor, and that's their identity, right? Everything that they do is about that versus it being an event that they have gone through or dealt with. We're not married to one way of doing things. We're married to following the research and getting results for ourselves and our patients,
Mm-hmm.
and in a way that is truly figuring out what the problem is and fixing the problem. And I think that's the whole point of the podcast. That looks different for everybody, which is why we try to find out everything we can, right? And I agree with you. If what we just said the past few minutes like really pisses you off, makes you mad, creates a big reaction, that's okay. And either you're going to be mad and that's okay. You could be mad and then you could have a moment where you say, why am I so mad?
Mm-hmm.
And that's good. Getting curious about why you're so mad is good. And it may be because you realize what we're saying has some truth and it's time to take the next step.
And it
And
also
being open to
goes,
figure it out.
it goes against what you believe. So naturally that is going to be the response. I respond that way to stuff that goes against the things that I tell myself that I believe.
Yeah.
And then I have to go.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing is that there's no wrong way to do this. It's all a part of a journey. So like I would never tell anybody something that they did was wrong or stupid.
Mm-mm.
Or I think that's really important to say. And I just wanted to say it.
No, I would just be respectful of all the different avenues that someone can go.
Yeah.
Like if you listen to our episode, if this is the first episode that you're listening to, go listen to the last episode and learn about my experience in the healthcare system recently. Me having a seizure and getting my first migraine and going through that system and process and understanding what it's there for and what it does, but that it's not about keeping me healthy long-term throughout my life. And so there's no reason that we shouldn't be open to at least looking at things and trying things. And I get it. There are scammers out there and assholes and people that only care about making money and they aren't really there for your best benefit. I understand that, but that's not everyone.
I think that was a really good segue. And I felt it was really important to talk about that because when I talk about epigenetics, it's really easy to feel a lot of like guilt and shame because you feel like things are your fault, you know?
Yep.
And that's not what we're talking about. what I'm going to talk about, what I want to talk about is really it's a message of hope and hopefully empowerment in that you have way more influence over your health than you think you do, than you've been led to believe up to this point. And essentially what epigenetics is it's not about changing your DNA coding. It's about changing what those genes are doing. And we literally have the power to turn specific genes on or off based on the environment we're putting our biology into. So it's just the study of how your behaviors and environment can cause changes and affect the way your genes work. Like simply put, that's what epigenetics is. And not only does it affect you, if you're having kids, if you're thinking about having kids, it affects your future legacy. It's a really important piece here, and it has and it can have massive impact if you lean into it and aren't scared of facing the reality of that your decisions have consequences every single day.
I mean,
right?
that's just true. You just have to lean into the fact of like, okay, that's true and that makes sense. And it's like, okay, well, if that makes sense, and there's like, we're obviously going to share some stuff. The amount of information that you can look up about this and about studies and about all sorts of things when it goes to this is crazy.
Epigenetics used to be kind of fringe. You can pull up over like 15,000 search results. It is one of the most popularly studied subjects because it lends this message of hope in that we do have a lot of influence and power over how our body works. And so it is something you can research and figure out for yourself.
They started to realize it was true. Like you can literally look at certain genetic factors and you can look at certain things and then go look at this person versus this person, maybe sisters or mom to daughter or mom to son or dad, like, and you can see based on certain factors and changes maybe that family made that then created this. And it's like, how is that happening?
Yeah,
like,
it really
should be this, but because of that, that's not happening. And why is that? And it's like, well, we then have the ability to go into the fuse box of our genes and flip certain ones one direction or another direction and be able to do that through what it is that we're doing.
Yeah, it really got bigger, I would say, with the breast cancer gene. the BRCA1, like you can find out if you have that marker and if you're quote unquote predisposed to something like breast cancer. They also found something like that with dementia. Like you can be predisposed to certain things, but predisposition, right, doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get it. And I think this is where you have these stories of like women who have this genetic marker and they're going to get double mastectomies because they don't want to get breast cancer. Totally respect that decision. And predisposition does not mean like fact. Like that's what we're talking about is you have the ability to turn genes on and off with this information. And I would think there's different processes in which that can happen. One of them we've talked about is methylation. You talked about this, I think, a few episodes ago.
This is what I'm most fascinated by.
So there's two really common variants in our DNA coding. There's a ton of different variants. And when I say variant, I mean an exchange in like the DNA structure where we have certain methylating factors or non-methylating factors. And what methylation is just like a group. What is it? You know it more than me, Brandon. It's just a chemical group, like a little, like if you're thinking about organic chemistry, what is it's just the hydrogen?
No, it's literally just a grouping of like carbons, hydrogens.
Yeah.
I would have to look it up, but it's called a methyl group. So
Yes.
you have a methyl, I think, man.
But
no,
it's just,
methyl is literally just carbon and 4 hydrogens, I'm pretty sure, because you have methyl, ethyl, propyl, butyl, like you have based on how many carbons that they have. Yeah.
Methyl alcohols.
Yep.
All
Yeah.
those.
So you have those based on
Exactly.
that. So a methyl group is literally essentially, I'm pretty sure, just a carbon group with hydrogens that's attached to it. And essentially what you can do with that is you have methylation, which is essentially the removal, right? So when we methylate it, when we methylate it, we're adding to it, or when we demethylate it, we're basically removing that.
Yeah.
So what happens is, based on my understanding, methylation can actually turn on certain things where demethylation, I think I have that backwards. Typically, methylation turns it off. So we could add a methyl group, boom, we've turned that off, versus demethylation would actually turn it on, or removing that would be like, boom, now we've activated it.
So when we have, and it's the MTHFR.
I was about to say that's the one I was literally just going to mention.
Variant. And there's 2 types that are the most common, and you can Google that and it'll pull right up. But typically we're seeing a lot of people, and they often get the term like highly sensitive. It's a lot of times they're dealing with like invisible illness or something, because what happens is their bodies, because they're missing these methylating factors, their body has a harder time detoxing and processing and getting rid of waste, which means they have higher congestion internally, higher inflammation, right? We talked about inflammation just being like congestive chaos, like a bunch of crud, sludge in your body constantly. And so it's harder for them to get rid of things that person that does not have those variants, right? And so what you can do is you can find out if you've got any variants, and there's very specific supplementation you can take that will methylate, right? So then we're turning certain genes off, which allows our body to process and work more efficiently.
Like MTHFR is very high with people. It creates a lot of problems for people who have like a lot of traumatic brain injuries, head injuries, concussions. Like that's one of the ones that you see in big expression for people who have had head traumas, and it being associated with that. Like I got a whole book. We could literally, if this is something that fascinates people, and if we got a bunch of comments, it's like, hey, I want to learn more about that. It's like, that's one of the big ones that you tend to see when it comes to that. I also looked it up just to clarify. So a methyl group is a CH3. So what that means is there's 3 hydrogens attached to it, and it has 1 connection that is still open. So then it can be able to attach.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So it's literally just 3. It's a carbon with 3 hydrogens, and then 1. Basically, every carbon has 4 arms or 4 attachments, where it could be like, I can hold on to you and you and you and you. And so a methyl is 3 of those. And then what happens is, based on our biochemistry, there's so many different ways where you can make those up, or you can have connections, or just different ways that we would be creating these genetic connections that we're making. What I would love to, and maybe you've gone into this more, like, I don't know a whole lot about it. Like, I'm interested to know like what things would lead to more demethylation versus methylation in certain processes. Like, is that going back to what we talk about with like free radicals and oxidative stresses, and that's causing that essentially?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So like that's the kicker here. And there's a couple other ways. But I think methylation is the most important piece to this that we're going to talk about here for this podcast anyway. Is these, like you said, a concussion, a traumatic brain injury is a huge traumatic event. That can very easily change the way genes are expressed. Just like whenever we have a psychotic break, right? Like whenever you hear people that are now dealing with schizophrenia, or like we think of like, I know Austin's homeless population is crazy. And the amount of people experiencing homelessness that have mental health issues is like so closely correlated, right? But then you go back and you look at those people's histories and there's trauma after trauma after trauma, right? And so the big piece of this, and we talk about neuroplasticity all the time, and that goes into this too, because when we're doing the unsexy things, when we're eating the way our body wants us to eat, when we're aware of how our body's functioning and what factors we have, what factors we don't have, right? We're aware of how like the health of our microbiome, our digestive tract, like we're reducing our inflammation. Essentially what we're doing is helping our body function better, which is going to increase that telomere length. And when we have an increase in the telomere length, we know that our cellular age is not accelerating beyond our actual age. There's even, you can, so like when they have studies of that too, like your age, like your biological age can be younger than your actual age based on the health and fitness of your DNA, your telomeres, your inflammation, how well you take care of yourself.
Age versus like your
metabolic age.
Metabolic age that I know. I didn't know about your biological, like you can actually have like, so that makes sense because you have people that look like they're like 12, but they're actually 30. Like, and well, we get into that also gets into like different diseases and things like that that play a factor. But there are people that just take care of themselves so well that they. And
you often see like smokers age way beyond their actual age.
Doesn't it disrupt collagen and all sorts of things?
Because of all this oxidative stress.
Right, but you're talking about massive amounts of free radicals.
Massive amounts of free radicals, maximum amounts of chronic inflammation, all of that, right? And so you can literally
like through the roof, like you're not breathing in oxygen, you're breathing in smoke. You're
carbon monoxide,
like pollutants, right? You're breathing in
additives they put in cigarette smoke.
Yeah, like all of the above.
And carcinogens, sorry.
Yeah,
exactly. And you can look at those people, they sound different, they look different, right? Like their hair's different. Like it's not just their skin.
The major one you get, the one that you get to see the most is like the skin around the lips.
Yeah.
They say because the collagen's disrupted, and then also you're constantly in the like the puckered lip fit, like
right, right. So yeah, exactly. And so all of these choices have consequences, some more than others, right? Like some are going to accelerate this. I call it like a disease process, but just like the shortening of the telomeres by the intensity of what we're doing. Like smoking cigarettes is way more intense than eating a cookie daily.
I'd also love to see
like
because
that would not even be bad. That could be good. It just depends on what's in the cookie and if your body likes that. If you have like a gluten intolerance and you're constantly eating flour.
Well, and the fact that if pesticides are in really the flour that are in,
Sure. Yeah. Or you're drinking a bunch of tap water in Flint, Michigan, like that's going to cause a lot more issues than drinking tap water in a place that doesn't have chronic leakage from industrial companies, right?
Well, and I can already hear the comments of people like, yeah, but, what about the person that, lives longer than everyone and smokes every day and does it, like, whatever it is. Like, I know there's going to be the exception because we love to look for the exception, not the rule. It's like, I don't think that gives us cause of like, well, then you should just do that. Because I think people who think like that are probably going to do it that way. But it's like, I bet, and they've probably looked at it, and there probably is something genetically, and maybe they do have something that is demethylated or methylated that has been switched, or just something that is going on within their genetic makeup that allows them the ability to, whatever we want to say, get away with that. But that doesn't necessarily mean that that's the thing that we should be doing.
Well, it's interesting you guys say that because have y'all seen I think it's a documentary series or documentary on Netflix about blue zones?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I haven't seen it, but I know about blue zones. Yeah.
You know that all those blue zones, these
blue zones are...
geographic areas that people live the longest, like up to like 100 and plus years old.
There's zones.
Yeah,
I'm about to move.
They're all around the world.
One's in
California,
right?
Mm-hmm.
But they're all in these tropical, like very paradisey. And it's interesting when you say stress because I feel like those areas are less stress because you've got like the sun is shining all the time and you're out and you get to see the ocean, and the ocean is a calming experience when you look at it. And
they're often places that have like community, very community oriented.
Right.
You naturally walk places, like the walkability is really high. The diet tends to be more fresh, right? They're usually on coasts.
I'm retiring in a blue zone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But they've done studies of like why does this population of people live so long and have quality of life?
Is there any in Hawaii?
I don't know off the top of my head. I know one's on the Mediterranean.
I'm sure that probably used to be before we came in and invaded.
Okay,
and
I could go there.
Yeah,
because I'm down for some Mediterranean food.
I'm sure Hawaii used to, but until we invaded it,
damn, you're right.
Yeah.
Then gave them back their independence.
Yeah.
I don't want to get on that topic,
but anyway, that's really. I keep bumping the microphone. I don't know if y'all can hear that. That's really, really what we got is basically how. I wanted this episode. I know it was a lot of information, and hopefully you can go have a starting point to do some of your own research. Figure out if you are somebody that deals with this sort of invisible illness, chronically sick, you're predisposed to some stuff. It would be a good idea for you to start looking into this sort of thing if you want to have kids. This is something that's become really relevant for me as I've been looking at my own daughter's health stuff. I hope I've just given you some places to start with looking up the methylating factors and the MTHFR variants and more information about the inflammation and the oxidative stress and what you can do. It's the unsexy things, right? Yeah. It's the things we always talk about that are going to continue to help this process, to continue to help you turn off certain things, turn on certain things, to help us manage our stress, to help us talk about our, healing the traumas that we've had, the traumas that, whether they're physical, whether they're emotional, whatever the case, all of that's really important into our quality of life, and not just living as long as we can, but the quality. Like we want the quality to be there.
Quality and quantity, not just like, oh, hey, great quality, but the quantity was, or vice versa.
Yeah. We want both, and we can have both. And I'm of the opinion that knowledge is power. And so the more information we have, the more knowledge we have. And when we get the courage to really face reality and take control of take ownership of our lives, then there's a lot we can do. There's a lot we can do with this information.
And I also want to empower you, literally, before we close this out, to know, because I know there's the one person that's like, dude, you don't even know. I've done this research. I've looked at these things. I'm the one it doesn't apply. Yeah, I do this stuff that you're talking about. I freaking live in a blue zone. I do this. Like, listen, I had a patient probably 4 years ago. Her name was Jasmine, and she found me because she was that person. Looking at her, you'd think that girl's healthy. Like, you would just look at her and think like, that's probably a healthy person. And she was not. When she had come to me, she had not had a job for 16 months because she had put her body under so much stress and had all these health conditions going on that it was advised for her that she quit her job and stop working for a while and reduce her stress. And so she started implementing all these things, and she was reducing her free radicals. And she's like, I've been juicing and I do all this. She's been doing all these things that we talk about, which I know you're listening going, that's what I'm talking about, dude. And that's why I'm frustrated. And that's why you piss me off. And that's why I think you're full of shit. But I'm here to tell you that
Nice.
because she gave me an opportunity and a chance, and because we didn't skip over one of the most important parts, which is the fact that we cannot ignore that the health and function of your nervous system is super important. We can oxygenate the shit out of you. We can get all these free radicals gone.
Yep.
We can change those epigenetics. We can do all these things. But if the master system, your nervous system that controls and orchestrates and runs all of these functions while you sleep and recover and don't even think about it because you're worried about what am I going to have for dinner and when are we doing this? And I got to go pick up, Shelly over here and we got to go drop Billy off over here. Your body is doing and running so many functions. Like I'm telling you, you have an amazing body that has the ability to do amazing things when it's functioning at its highest optimum ability. And so if you've tried all of that stuff and it's not working, we need to make sure that your nervous system is working, because when we did that, we literally changed her life and everything switched. And we could go into the story and give you all the details and all that stuff. You guys know what we did. You know the process that I took her through. And if you don't, go back and listen to old episodes and you could hear what we talk about scanning and x-rays and doing upper cervical adjustments and focusing on the health and function of her nervous system so that all those things that she was doing were now amplified to actually do what it is that she was wanting.
Yep.
And it literally changed her life. But if she hadn't been open to at least figuring that out and trying something, because she had also been to chiropractors before too, and that didn't, she was just like, I looked at your stuff and it looks like it's different and I've researched these things and I really think it's, something going on neurologically and I think my autonomic nervous system is off. And like she had done her research and looked at this and was like, this seems to be what makes the most sense. And guess what? She was right. It did. And so I want people to know, because I get it. I'm the one of one. I'm the exception. I'm, everyone else is the rule, but I'm the exception. I'm the person. I would love to fall under that, but I don't. It's like, but you do. I hate to tell you, but the cheesy ass thing that all the people in our profession say is, this shit's like gravity. It works whether you believe it or not.
Right.
Like, I don't believe in gravity. Well, go outside and jump off of something and tell me if you hit the ground or if you float. Because I hate to tell you, one of the first things you learn as a kid is shit falls down, not up.
Right.
Things go down, not up. Like, oh, I don't randomly just float away one time. So it's a principle. It's a way that the body functions. So when we work on improving those things and improving that function and getting the body where it's supposed to be, you then get to enjoy the fruits and benefits of what that is. So I just want you to know that. That's all. I'll off-tang soapbox moment. I'll leave it there.
No, it's an important point. It's a very important point, and I'm glad you brought it up, because there is going to be that person, maybe multiple people, and we always say you haven't tried everything until you've tried upper cervical chiropractic. That's what we say. So
and listen, I'm there. I just went through all of it. I get it.
All done.
Yep. I understand.
Hopefully we gave you lots of starting points. Maybe you go visit Dr. B out in Dallas, Texas, Richardson to be specific.
Or any of our other ones.
Send this episode to somebody you thought of. Make sure you like, follow, subscribe, share it, do all the things. We would love that. And until next time, see ya.
We love you.